Hello people and welcome to Btekt. David here, and today I want to talk about the camera on the Nokia 7 Plus. And I'm going to compare it as well with the camera on the Honor 10, which is one of the 7 Plus's main competitors. Now I've been enjoying using the 7 Plus for a few weeks now, and I honestly have no desire to switch back to anything flagship or anything I've tested this year at all really. I think that HMD Global have got it so right with the Nokia 7 Plus. The build quality and general design, I just can't say enough good things about it. I think all smartphones should come with a copper option. It's got a very good screen. Although it's not an OLED panel, it's still a very high quality LCD. And I'd rather have a good quality LCD than a low end OLED any day. This is something that I'm discovering with the Nokia 8 Sirocco. The screen on that phone is OLED, but if you ask me, the much larger display on the Nokia 7 Plus kind of embarrasses its bigger and far more expensive brother. I'm in the middle of reviewing the Nokia 8 Sirocco, so look out for that and subscribe if you want to know what I think of that one. Before we go on, I want to say a shout to our sponsors Direct Mobiles. They have 23 years of award-winning customer service and have amazing deals on all the latest handsets. Check in the video description below for a link to their website, or check out their deals at directmobiles.co.uk. So let's go over the specs. Main camera on the Nokia is a 12 megapixel sensor with a Zeiss f1.75 lens and a full frame equivalent view of 25mm. The sensor has the brilliant dual pixel autofocus system and has the larger 1.4 micron pixels, which help gather more light for improved low light performance. So decent specs on paper, but I really think that this camera is lacking OIS, and I'll talk some more about that a bit later. The secondary camera is a 13 megapixel sensor, although it has an effective megapixel count of 12. And it's equipped with an f2.6 Zeiss lens with 2x optical zoom to give you a closer view without losing any quality. On the front is a 16 megapixel sensor with fixed focus and f1.8 Zeiss optic. I'm finding that the general performance of the camera to be very good for a system at this price point. It's got to be the cheapest way you could shoot Zeiss. And you do kind of get a sense that those lenses really do make what probably is a very average smartphone camera punch well above its weight. The 16 megapixel front camera produces very nice images, surprisingly good in fact. The pictures are sharp and detailed and the colours are well reproduced. I'm really happy with the results in most conditions. Dynamic range isn't very high with this sensor, but I think as long as you keep that in mind, most people will be very happy with the selfie cam. I much prefer it to the 24 megapixel sensor that you get with the front camera on the Honor 10. This is the same sensor that's in a few of Huawei's phones, most notably the P20 and the P20 Pro, and even the flagship P20 Pro, which is known for having the best smartphone camera on the market. I think this sensor underperforms. If you're patient, you can get a relatively good shot from it, but most of the time I find that it overexposes and gives an unnatural looking shot. Let me go over the specs for the Honor. The main camera is a 16 megapixel sensor with the f1.8 lens and phase detection autofocus. That's backed up by a 24 megapixel black and white sensor, also with f1.8 lens, and also has phase detection autofocus. The two sensors combine to give the most sharp and as detailed shot as possible. The phase detection autofocus works very well on the Honor, but not quite as well as the dual pixel autofocus on the Nokia. Portrait mode or live bokeh mode is available on both the front and rear cameras with the Nokia 7 Plus and is excellent, especially from the rear camera. Those Zeiss lenses producing very smooth and pleasing bokeh. Edge detection is very good too, but is inevitably not as good with the front camera. But that's not to say that the portraits from the front camera are terrible, far from it. Compared to the Honor, it's very close when it comes to the quality of the portrait shots. But the Honor does have an advantage here. It's able to focus much closer. The 7 Plus uses the telephoto lens for the portrait mode, so therefore the focusing distance is quite far back. Front video is shot at 30 frames per second and in 1080p resolution on both devices, and it helped out with electronic image stabilization. It does a good job on the Nokia. If you're not moving around, it works just fine, but there is quite a bit of vibration when walking, even if walking fairly carefully. The Honor 10 seems to control the shake much better. It's still there, but it's nowhere near as much as the Nokia. It's the same kind of deal with the rear cameras. The Nokia records both Full HD and 4K at 30 frames per second, as does the Honor 10. However, neither of these devices are capable of stabilizing the 4K footage, which looks great on both incidentally. The EIS does do a pretty good job on stabilizing the 1080p video though, although there is more of that microshake coming from the Nokia than from the Honor. Quality wise, I think that the fancy glass on the Nokia does put it slightly ahead of the Honor here, and for me the general colour reproduction is more natural. I think that from the pictures from the main camera, this seems to be the case as well. It's basically Zeiss glass versus AI camera smarts, and while the AI does do a good job of enhancing the photos, it is a bit hit and miss, oversaturating and over-sharpening to an extreme, and sometimes completely ruining the shot. I wouldn't mind if it was very occasionally, but it's really not. The Nokia does take more consistently good pictures, and it has almost everything it needs to be an excellent camera, but I'm finding that the low light performance isn't very good really. Even indoors by the window, it does struggle to get a blur-free shot. But it's not really the fault of the sensor. Those extra large pixels do help to keep those images noise-free. Optical stabilization would really improve the overall performance of this camera. I really wish it had it, as most of my shots indoors are turning out blurry. But I guess that some of this could be down to the software. Speaking of which, the camera app isn't the most user-friendly. Lots of buttons, and on both sides of the screen, it is a bit annoying to use. It's the simple things like having the button to switch between front and rear cameras way at the top, so it's nearly impossible to reach it with one hand, or putting the live bokeh mode inside the settings menu rather than just having a dedicated button for it on the main screen. Instead, there is dedicated buttons for the beauty mode, the picture-in-picture feature, which takes a picture with both the front and the rear camera simultaneously, the shutter timer, and a HDR toggle switch. In the video settings you have time-lapse and you have slow motion video. Slow motion video is recorded at 120 frames per second and in full HD. Here it is compared to the Honor at the same resolution. The Pro mode on the Nokia gives you control of all the camera settings and displays them in quite a nice intuitive way. However, just like the rest of the camera app, it's frustrating to use. The longest exposure time is only 4 seconds and it offers you no picture preview. So if you want to know whether or not your shot has the correct exposure, you have to actually take the picture and then adjust. The Honor 10's camera app, as well as being far more comprehensive with its shooting modes, is also just much nicer to use. Unlike the Nokia, all of the buttons that you're most likely to use are in reach with one hand. And in the Honor 10's Pro mode, you get an exposure time of up to 30 seconds, which is much more useful than just 4 seconds. Not to mention a picture preview, which just makes the whole Pro mode much more easier to use. And to be honest, without a picture preview, there's kind of no point in a Pro mode. And although the AI may not be to everybody's taste, you can switch it off quite easily. But if you don't care about Pro mode or gimmicks like the AR lens, the Nokia 7 Plus's camera is good enough. For the price point, yeah, there might be better options. But the 7 Plus still holds its own, taking really nice pictures in the right conditions. If this thing had an optical stabilizer, it'd be excellent, but it doesn't. So getting a good shot can be tricky sometimes. But if the camera's not your #1 concern when buying a smartphone, then you really should check out the Nokia 7 Plus. This is one of the best smartphones that you can buy for this money. So that's it from me. Thanks for watching my little camera comparison with the Nokia 7 Plus and the Honor 10. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and hit subscribe and the notification bell for lots more coming from Btekt, including coverage of IFA. I've been David Wildman and this was Btekt.